I stared at the photo, the dust still gritty on my fingers, and realized the man who raised me, the man whose grave I visited every single year on the anniversary of his passing, wasn't my father at all. Richard, my kind, stoic, often distant father, was a lie. The realization hit me not in a wave of gradual acceptance, but like a physical blow, sucking the air right out of the empty garage where my mother had carelessly stored this final, damning box of memories before selling the house. I had gone to retrieve an old childhood teddy bear, but found this instead, a small, silver locket box, hidden deep beneath Richard's old work uniform. The key was taped underneath the box itself, a move so clumsy and desperate it screamed of secrets meant to be buried permanently. Inside the box, nestled on cheap, faded velvet, was a single, square, black and white photograph. It showed my mother, Maria, looking impossibly young and radiantly happy, leaning into a man I had never seen before. He was tall, sharp-featured, and cradled me, a tiny, wrinkled newborn, in the crook of his arm, his expression one of pure, unrestrained adoration. But it wasn't Richard. Richard had thick, dark hair and heavy brows. This man had lighter, almost sandy hair and laughing eyes, eyes that mirrored mine exactly. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. My fingers, trembling violently, flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back, in my mother's elegant handwriting, were 3 words, followed by a date, Julian and Elena, June 92. There was no mention of Richard, no context, just this overwhelming evidence that the foundation of my entire life was built on sand. My mother was arriving home in 20 minutes, fresh from signing the final papers for the house sale, officially severing our connection to the only home Richard and I had ever shared. I needed to know who Julian was, and I needed to know before she walked through that door. The blood rushed in my ears, making the silence of the house deafening. I raced up to my bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and typed the name, Julian Vance, and the year, 1992, into the search bar. The first results that flashed on the screen made my stomach clench in nauseating recognition. He wasn't just some forgotten college fling. Julian Vance was, and still is, a renowned architect in our city, famous for his brutalist designs and massive public works projects. The contemporary photos showed a distinguished man, older now, with silver streaks in his sandy hair, but the structure of his face, the sharp jawline, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, was undeniably the same man holding baby me in the photo. The resemblance was uncanny, almost painful. It wasn't just the eyes now, it was the entire symmetry of my face, the subtle curve of my nose. Everything I thought I inherited from Richard was a lie. I clicked through his professional biography. Julian was married now, with 2 teenage sons. His bio mentioned his early struggles, a period of intense ambition and personal sacrifice, in the early 90s, before he landed his breakout project. The pieces started fitting together in the most horrible way imaginable. Maria had never been poor. She was always meticulous about her appearance, her life, her finances. Richard, my supposed father, had been a mid-level manager at a manufacturing plant who died suddenly of a heart attack when I was 8. His life insurance policy was substantial enough to secure our future, and my mother always spoke of him with reverence, portraying him as a struggling artist type who found peace in domesticity. But this photo shattered that narrative. The man in the picture, Julian, looked vibrant, alive, and like he was bursting with potential. Why would my mother trade this life for the one she had with Richard? I heard the familiar sound of her car pulling into the driveway, the crunch of the gravel under the tires. The time for silent investigation was over. It was time for war. I met her at the front door, the black and white photograph clutched so tightly in my hand that the corners were creased. Her face, usually composed and serene, crumpled instantly when she saw the picture. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving them a sickly, pale white. She didn't even have to ask where I found it. She just knew. "Elena, where did you get that?" "That was supposed to be gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible, shaking as she reached out a hand, either to take the photo or to steady herself. I backed away, shaking my head slowly. "Gone? Gone like my real father, Maria?" I used her first name, a boundary I had never crossed, and the sting of the betrayal made the words taste metallic in my mouth. "Richard is dead. He was my father." "You know that," she stammered, desperately trying to regain control. Her usual defenses, the carefully constructed mask of the grieving widow, were useless now. I didn't let her breathe. "His name is Julian Vance. He's an architect. He's alive, Maria. He's right here in the city. And he's my father, isn't he?" I threw the photo onto the antique mahogany table we were supposed to be selling next week. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Maria looked at the photo, then at me, and finally broke. She didn't deny it. "Yes," she choked out, running a hand over her face. "Yes, he is. But Richard was your true father. Richard loved you, Elena. Loved me enough to cover up your enormous lie." I countered, my voice rising to a shout. "Why? Why did you do this? Did Julian leave you? Did he not want me?" I felt the hot, burning sting of tears finally reaching my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I needed answers, not pity. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that felt utterly hollow to me. This wasn't grief, this was the terror of being exposed. Maria lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow, but there was a sudden, hard glint of defiance in them. It wasn't the look of a remorseful mother, but a woman defending a calculated choice. "Julian didn't leave me, Elena. I left him. I chose Richard," she said, the words cutting through the air like shards of glass. "We were young, Julian and I, passionate, brilliant, obsessed with our careers. He was going to change the world with his architecture, and I was going to be the perfect muse, the perfect partner. But we were also desperately poor. Living in a tiny, cramped studio apartment, eating ramen noodles, constantly fighting over the electric bill while he sketched blueprints that would never be built." She paused, sucking in a shuddering breath. "When I found out I was pregnant, I told Julian. He was thrilled. Absolutely ecstatic. He saw it as another reason to work harder, a symbol of our bright, bohemian future. But I saw the reality. I saw the struggle, the fear, the endless waiting for his big break that might never come. I couldn't bring a child into that chaos." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. "And then Richard came along." Richard, it turned out, was Maria's boss at the small gallery she managed. He was older, steady, secure. He had already inherited a significant trust and owned the house we were now selling outright. He was predictable, quiet, and he offered her a life of guaranteed safety. "I told Julian I had a miscarriage," Maria confessed, the raw brutality of the lie stunning me into silence. "I cut him off completely, moved in with Richard within weeks, and we were married a year later. Richard knew the baby was Julian's. He knew the whole story. But he loved me, Elena, and he desperately wanted a family, even if it was borrowed. He gave you his name, his home, his security. That's why I chose him. For security." The betrayal was compounded. It wasn't just my mother who had lied, Richard, the man I revered, had participated in the deception. Everything I ever knew about my family history was a carefully crafted illusion. She said she chose stability over love, security over passion. She traded a struggling, potentially brilliant future with Julian for the guaranteed comfort Richard offered, using me as the necessary catalyst for that exchange. But did her choice, born from desperation and a desire for financial peace, justify the 2 decades of lies? Did it justify stealing a father from his child and a child from her father? She looked at me now, pleading for understanding, attempting to frame the monumental deceit as an act of maternal sacrifice. I saved us, Elena. You had the best schools, the best clothes, the most beautiful childhood. Julian wouldn't have given you that then. He might have been a great father, but he was broke. I protected you from poverty. I couldn't process the sheer audacity of her defense. She spoke of financial stability as if it were a cure for emotional starvation. I had always been proud of my upbringing, but now every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every seemingly perfect moment felt tainted by the knowledge that the man celebrating with us knew he was playing a role in a play written by my mother. If stability means living a perpetual lie, is it worth the cost? Tell me in the comments, when is it okay to keep a life-altering secret from your child, or does the truth always deserve to be told, regardless of the consequences? I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. I couldn't stay in that room for another second, breathing the air saturated with her deception. I didn't bother to argue with her twisted logic. I just grabbed my keys. I'm going to see him, Maria, I stated flatly. I'm going to see Julian. You can't stop me. Her face drained again, now realizing the full, catastrophic consequences of her revelation. No, Elena. Please, you can't ruin his life now. He has a family, she wailed, but I was already out the door. Her protection of Julian's new life felt like a final, sickening stab of loyalty to the man she had lied about having a miscarriage for. The offices of Vance Architecture were everything my childhood home was not: sleek, modern, and utterly transparent, built mostly of glass and steel. I sat in the waiting area, trying to calm the violent tremor in my hands, clutching a portfolio containing the photo and the background check I had pulled on Julian. The receptionist, immaculate and efficient, finally ushered me into his spacious, light-filled office overlooking the city. Julian Vance looked up from his massive drafting table. He looked exactly like his updated profile picture, but closer, the small worry lines around his eyes gave away the passage of time. He offered me a warm, professional smile. "Ms. Elena, thank you for coming in. My assistant said you had a sensitive personal matter regarding some historical records of the firm." I didn't return the smile. I simply pushed the portfolio across the clean expanse of the desk until it stopped right under his hand. "It's not about the firm, Mr. Vance. It's about 1992. He looked confused, his brow furrowing slightly. Then he slowly opened the portfolio. He pulled out the black and white photo, and the moment his eyes registered the image, his younger self, Maria, and the baby, his breath hitched. The professional composure vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, agonizing shock. He looked at the photo, then back up at me, tracing the line of my jaw with his eyes, seeing the undeniable reflection of himself. He didn't need to ask who I was. He knew. "Maria, she told me you never existed," he managed, his voice a hoarse whisper. "She said she lost the baby. She vanished right after, moved away, changed her number. I tried to find her, I really did. I spent months searching. I thought she didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and that the pain of the loss was too great. The truth was infinitely more cruel than I had imagined. It wasn't just that Maria chose Richard, she systematically ripped me from Julian's life by fabricating a death." Julian stood up abruptly and walked to the panoramic window, running a hand through his hair, his posture radiating a profound sense of loss. When he finally turned back, his eyes were wet, but there was a flicker of something else, a terrible, quiet anger. I never stopped thinking about what if, he admitted, his voice regaining some strength. That baby, that was supposed to be everything. Maria and I, we were messy, yes, but we loved each other fiercely. When she called and told me, it was terrifying, but also exhilarating. And then she called back 2 weeks later, distant, cold, saying it was over, she couldn't handle it, and the pregnancy was gone. I was devastated. I threw myself into my work, convinced I had scared her off, convinced I wasn't good enough to support a family. That heartbreak fueled my ambition, yes, but at what cost? His focus returned to me. He took a hesitant step closer. You look exactly like my mother. Elena, why did she tell you this now? Why 20 years of silence and then this bomb? I explained the sale of the house, the forgotten lockbox, and her desperate confession. The relief in his face was startling. He had spent 2 decades believing I was dead or given away, consumed by guilt and confusion. Now, the weight of that false history seemed to lift, replaced by a painful, sharp joy. He reached out and gently touched my arm, confirming my reality to himself. I have so much to tell you. So many things I wanted to be for you. I felt a confusing mix of emotions, a sense of belonging, but also a deep loyalty to the memory of Richard, the man who stepped into the role of father despite knowing the truth. Julian and I talked for hours, stitching together the history that Maria had meticulously ripped apart. But the greatest shock was yet to come, lurking in the shadows of Richard's quiet sacrifice. Later that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, I returned to the empty house, my mother still absent, presumably hiding at a friend's. I went back to the garage, drawn by an instinct I couldn't ignore. I needed to know more about Richard. If he knew the truth, why did he comply? Was he a victim or a willing accomplice? Rummaging through the remaining boxes marked Dad's Tools, I found another box, smaller, wrapped in brown butcher paper and taped shut. It felt different from the clumsy lockbox. This one was meticulous, labeled only with the year, 2000, and my name. I was 8 years old in 2000. Richard died suddenly just a few months later. I tore the paper away, revealing a simple wooden box, secured with a sophisticated combination lock. Beneath the lock, a small note was glued, Elena, only open this on your 30th birthday. My 30th birthday had passed 6 months ago. Richard, even in death, had anticipated this moment. My hands shook as I worked the combination, my birthday, the year I was born. The lock clicked open. Inside, resting on the smooth wood, was a thick envelope addressed to me, and several official-looking documents from a law firm. I tore open the letter first. Richard's handwriting, familiar and comforting, swam before my eyes. My dearest Elena, it began. If you are reading this, I suspect you have finally found the truth Maria worked so hard to conceal. I have known since before the wedding that you were Julian's daughter. Maria came to me in despair. She was frantic, certain she couldn't raise you alone in poverty, and she convinced me that the greatest act of love I could perform was to give you a stable name and home. I did it because I loved her, yes, but mostly, I did it because I loved you from the moment I saw you. Richard's letter continued, detailing the depth of Maria's manipulation. He confessed that Maria was constantly paranoid that Julian would somehow find out the truth, which is why she always kept us moving slightly, subtly changing schools or cities, always just enough to stay off the radar. But the final pages of his letter contained the ultimate, beautiful act of revenge and protection. Maria believes I was a simple man who just signed everything over to her in a standard will. She thinks she inherited everything when I died, securing her future and her secrets. She did not. I frowned, pulling out the official legal documents. Richard revealed that years before his fatal heart attack, when Maria was particularly cruel to him during an argument about Julian's growing success, he had consulted with a lawyer. He had known, with chilling clarity, that Maria only loved the life he provided, not him. The bulk of his considerable estate, the insurance payout, the investments, the value of the house, was not left directly to Maria. He had established an irrevocable trust fund for me, locked until my 30th birthday, managed by an executor he specifically chose who had a sworn duty to keep the contents secret from Maria. Maria only received the minimum spousal requirement mandated by state law, enough to live modestly, but nowhere near the comfortable wealth she had grown accustomed to and protected so fiercely. Richard had ensured his wealth would protect me, even from the woman he loved. His final words in the letter were devastating: she valued money over everything. Now, she will have neither. I hope you find Julian, my brave girl. He always deserved to know you. You were the only true light in my life. The karmic scales had finally tipped. Maria's entire life was predicated on the stability Richard provided, and in the end, Richard took it all back, not out of spite, but out of pure, protective paternal love for the child she had used as collateral. The revenge wasn't mine, it was Richard's quiet, posthumous triumph. I stood before Maria in the now empty living room, the trust documents spread across the bare floor. She had returned, nervous and defensive, but still clinging to the belief that her material security was intact. Her jaw dropped when she realized the documents weren't just the deeds to the sold house. "What is this, Elena? What have you done?" I calmly explained Richard's careful, years-long plan. I detailed how she was entitled only to a fraction of the estate, enough to keep her comfortable, but certainly not enough for the lavish lifestyle she envisioned continuing. The millions, the real generational wealth, were mine. The stability she murdered my biological relationship for was now completely out of her grasp. Her face went through a terrifying transformation: denial, disbelief, and finally, shattering despair. He knew. He knew all this time, and he did this to me, she shrieked, tears finally flowing, not of remorse for her actions, but of rage at her financial ruin. I sacrificed everything for that life. No, Maria, I corrected her, picking up Richard's letter. You sacrificed me for that life. Richard, the man you lied to, the man you used, he was the one who truly loved me. He protected me from you, even after he was gone. Her screaming escalated into hysterical sobs. She was alone. Julian immediately welcomed me into his life, introducing me to his confused but quickly accepting family. We have begun the messy, beautiful work of building a relationship that should have started 30 years ago. Julian's wife, a kind, pragmatic woman, understood instantly that I was the ghost of his past, and she only offered support. My mother is now living in a small apartment, forced to work to maintain her lifestyle, slowly losing the superficial friends who only valued her status. She has reached out, but I cannot answer. Richard gave me the best of both worlds, stability, and now, the truth. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this, please subscribe to the channel Dramatic Zone, leave a like, and write in the comments which country you are from. Stay tuned, there will be a new story tomorrow.